Hello, and welcome to another episode of 9 Steps to Future-Proofing Your Warehouse. This is episode 8, so we are almost through, only one more to go. This episode, we will be looking at everything to do with dispatch. This week, I'll be joined again by our regular hosts from the Fuzzy Logics team, Jeff and Baz. And we also have special guests this week from Karl from DereOida and Cory from Daifuku BCS. As per usual, what we'll be doing is Baz this week will be talking you through everything to do with dispatch to begin with, and then both Karl and Cory will be talking about the particular elements, Karl on WMS and Cory on sortation. As always, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, please put them in the chat box. We really like to hear what you have to say, and at the end of the discussion, we will be having a panel discussion to answer any of those questions and to talk a bit more on the subject. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Baz, who will give you the overview on dispatch.
Great, thanks Daniel. And as usual, we'll have a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. It's a bit different this time because usually Jeffrey does the introduction PowerPoint, but since my background is more in WMS systems, he said, well, it's your job now this time, so you'll do the panel questions. We're almost at the end of our journey, so if you want to get to the next one, Daniel, for me, I'll skip straight past the little nice Fuzzy Logics logo. Over the past, I think this is session number 8 out of 9, Jeffrey and I covered a lot of these topics, actually covered most of the topics. So now the final one, so it's sorting and dispatch. Now, sorting and dispatch is the last step in a warehouse process. It's the last chance to get it right. So if we look at a warehouse at all the functional areas, this is functional area number 7, and this is literally the last time you can get it right for your customers. So Daniel, if you want to go to the next one, I'll go through this really quickly because I'd rather have Cory and Karl talk about their respective sessions rather than us doing a lot on just the theoretical stuff. So functional process number 7, we've skipped loading and shipping out of this simply because it's a relatively straightforward process and we focused on sortation first. Now sortation, if you think of sortation, and originally I had a photograph here of a baggage carousel in line with what Daifuku does as well, because the end sortation to me is where I can go and pick up my bag from a conveyor line at an airport. I basically have to take the right one. It's the exact same thing that happens in a warehouse. So at the end of the picking and the packing process, this is where we make sure that we sort all of our shippers, all of our packages to the right destination to make sure they actually arrive at our customer's destination in time with the right carrier and there's no delays. And actually to be safe, it's actually even worse than that. We want to make sure that we don't damage anything in this last piece. Because this is where we can really make our mark on keeping our customers happy and engaged. So what is sortation? So sortation is nothing more than sorting a product to the right destination at the right time and basically before what usually happens the cutoff time for any carriers. So one of the things we put on here in the best practice tips is, a lot of people use Australia Post. A simple thing, make sure you have enough UDLs for sortation. It's one of the easy things to lose track of. When you, at the beginning of the day, go, great, I've got 1,000 orders to pack for today and 1,000 orders to ship for today, and I have 2 ULD cages. All of a sudden, I can sort and pick and pack all I want, but my stock isn't going to leave my warehouse because Australia Post can't pick it up. Now, sortation sounds really, really simple. Pick up a box, read the barcode, read what's on the label, put it into a cage or put it onto a pallet, and my carrier will come and pick it up. If only it were that simple. All too often, what we see happening is operators get tired at the end of the day, people drop things, cartons get damaged, people miss the cutoff time for a carrier, and all of a sudden, what was a really good planned exercise turns into a disaster. Now, this is where technology can really help out in making sure that sortation is done properly, accurately, and at the right time. And in the end, it's all about making sure that we have a great customer experience and we have traceability of everything that leaves our warehouse. If you can go to the next one for me, Daniel. I'll do the same. So the most common sortation methods. These are a couple of photographs of some of our own customers as well. It's split into two, so I've kept it very simple. So the first one is manual or mechanical sortation, and this is basically the simplest way of sortation. Something arrives at the end of the process, and this can be either after packing or after picking, depending on how your process is set up. There's usually none or there's simple technology involved. So if you look at the picture on the right-hand side at the top, this is what we call a poor man's sorter. It is nothing more than basically just a conveyor loop where cartons actually just rotate and rotate and rotate and rotate. And there'll be pallets on the floor and ULDs on the floor. Someone's just going to have to take a carton, look at the label and going, this is for client number 1. It goes Australia Post. I have to walk to the Australia Post pallet or ULD, drop it in. I walk back to the conveyor line. I pick up the next one. I look at the barcode going, oh, this is for pallet number 1. It's simple, but at the same time, it relies on operators to sort based on what we call human readable data on a dispatch label. So if you imagine getting a carton from Australia Post, there'll be a big barcode on it, and then there'll be like a tiny little text box that says your name, your address, your state, and your postcode. That's what operators rely on to sort. Now, if you do this all day long, after a couple of hours, your eyes are going to go square. You're going to make mistakes. Everyone at some point is going to make mistakes. And the longer you get to the end of the day itself, the more mistakes are going to happen, because people, as we all are, were basically starting to get to the end of the day. We're thinking, oh, what's for dinner tonight? Or have the kids finished homework? And all of a sudden, the carton that needs to go to New South Wales ends up going to Victoria. And if it goes to Victoria, me living in New South Wales ends up having to wait 2 more days for my order, which isn't really good for my customer experience. So that's where sortation and automation comes into place. So if you look at the second one, the automated sortation system, we end up with what we call smart technology. Now, smart technology is where we use technology to read the barcode on the label instead of an operator having to read the text on the label. Now, automation makes no mistakes, and I can't say no mistakes because there's always a slight chance of something going wrong, but that chance is limited to maybe a barcode that's misread or something that gets damaged during the barcode printing itself. This is where we can really shine. So sortation with technology allows us to get more speed through our sortation system. It allows us to make the least amount of mistakes, and at the same time, it allows us to actually get the least amount of damages during sortation itself. It's all too easy, if you look at that top corner again, for someone to pick up a box, misjudge the weight, and actually drop the box on the floor, and all of a sudden what's in my box is damaged. I had a box turn up 2 weeks ago with pendant lights, and the box from the outside looked like it'd been gone through the wringer to a washing machine, and that's how it showed up on my door. So someone literally dropped the box. Luckily, everything inside was in one piece because the manufacturer had put enough padding in the box to make sure it survived. But that's not what I want to show up at my doorstep. I want to have a perfect box or a perfect satchel show up at my door at the right time, shortly after it left the warehouse. That's where smart sortation comes in. So Daniel, if you can go to the next one for me. Cory will actually speak a lot more about smart sortation in his presentation coming up. But smart sortation comes in many shapes and forms nowadays. So we all know the big sortation systems that we see at TNT and DHL, where it's all high speed and we get all these tilt tray things and the likes. They're what we call high speed, high automation sortation systems. What we see happening lately as well is sort of a low-tech automated sortation systems. Now, the ones at the top are actually just landed here in Australia through Kerber. So the people we had in the session 2 weeks ago, they've actually released the technology here. This is, we call low-tech. It's an operator relying on little machines to drive around and sort what we need to be sorted into a tray or into a final destination. It can be a Australia Post ULD. But it basically, the operator scans the barcode, it then drops it onto a little robot, the robot goes off, and based on what it was given by the barcode, it drops it into the tray. It's very simple, very straightforward, it's very low tech, very low costs in terms of entry level. Then the next thing we see happening now as well, and this is the bottom one, it's sortation as a service. Now, unfortunately, we don't have that here yet. The video was taken 2 years ago at Modex in the US, and it's basically some module you can add to the end of a sortation system. It actually allows that robot to sort and pick based on what comes down the sortation chute. Now, the beauty of this is it actually allows you to pay as you go almost. So not only with pay as you go, if you have a seasonal business, so let's say you are in a fashion business, fashion is very straightforward. At the beginning of the season, there's little sales, it goes to stores, but towards the middle of the season, it really ramps up because all of a sudden people are used to the new season and your orders go through the roof until you hit the peak of the season, and then it starts to taper off again. So at the beginning of the season, you might do 100 orders a day. Great, you pay for 100 sortation picks. In the middle of the season, you may do 1,000 orders a day. Now, the beauty of the bottom one is if you're doing 100, you pay for 100. So you pay a fixed amount per sort. If you're doing 1,000, you're paying a fixed amount per sort. So in low season, you're paying for 100 sorts. In peak season, you're paying for 1,000 sorts. No upfront investment. It's basically a bolt-on solution, and it basically means that it's not a capital investment, it's an operational investment. So it's like a pay-as-you-go model. Now, we've been speaking to a few vendors recently, and slowly but steadily, that model will actually start to appear in the next couple of years in Australia, not just for sortation, but also for a lot of other things. So keep that in mind when you start thinking about automation, that's what's coming next. Daniel, next slide for me, please. So that was, that was sortation. Now, there'll be a lot more from Cory, luckily, because I have to tend to stick to the bare minimum of this. We'd love to get the vendors to talk as well. We sort of skipped one important component in all of our session because everything was focused on automation, technology. Jeff spoke a lot about data and integrity of data and process management. So unfortunately, Karl came to the sessions a bit later and we couldn't fit him in anywhere else. Luckily, he's going to talk about warehouse management systems. Warehouse management systems literally are the backbone of a warehouse. So all of those 7 steps that we had before, from receiving through to put away, through to storage, inventory management, replenishment, picking, packing, sortation, dispatch, all our mobile devices, all our label printing, all of our interaction with our customers in terms of data, it's all handled through what we call a warehouse management system. At the very least, every warehouse should at least have a basic WMS. If you don't, please, please, please go out and get one. There are so many options available today in the market, from low cost, low tech to high cost, high tech, and anything in between. But at the very least, get yourself a WMS. It is the easiest way to start getting traceability of what happens within the 4 walls of your warehouse and even beyond that. And lately what we're seeing, and Karl will talk about this as well, there is so much innovation happening in warehouse management systems that there is so much you can do. This is where you can really, really get a huge benefit out of your warehouse, is by just starting to basically control what happens within the 4 walls. Start tracking all your inventory. Start tracking what your operators are doing. Start capturing data. Data will be the key to growing your business and making it more efficient in the future. So if you can go to the next slide for me, which is the second last one. Now, as I said before, my background is from warehouse management systems. 20 years ago, that's where I started implementing WMS systems. And at the time, there wasn't that much choice. So warehouse management systems have been around since probably the 60s or 70s at the time when we had the first computers coming out. So if you look at, Gartner always does they're a research firm, a global one. Gartner does a yearly Gartner Magic Quadrant. I wanted to put it in, but I figured it's easy just to talk around what's on the screen. Now, the Gartner Magic Quadrant for warehouse management systems is an overview of what the world sees as innovative leaders versus the followers and the established guard. Now, unfortunately, Gartner only focuses on the top 20 probably globally, and it's an American-based version, so it won't have all local players. So if you hear people talking about tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 vendors, this is what it basically means. So tier 3, I'll start with the ones on the right. Mostly local vendors. You get the likes of the Tall Ships and the Paperless here in Australia and a few others. Local vendors, they've grown organically. They've been around for probably 20 years. They'll have limited R&D budgets because locally there's a limited customer base. Functionality will be sufficient for most businesses. And usually it's like an entry into WMS systems. Then you get tier 2 and tier 1. There's a bit of an overlap here. So tier 1, you're talking the Oracles, the Manhattans, the JDAs, and the likes. And what's happening today is those tier 2 companies, and in the past you'd had High Jump and all the likes, slowly but steadily the tier 1 businesses are actually gobbling up the tier 2 ones. So they're actually growing through acquisition. Whereas tier 2 is local vendors that have grown, they've grown organically, they've globalized, they get to a certain size and they get bought up by the Oracles and the Manhattans, and all of a sudden they stop existing and they get consummated almost into the bigger fries, bigger fish in the pond. Now, all of these have a place in the market. So the tier 1s, the tier 2s, great functionality. They've got substantial R&D budgets, so there's continuous improvement happening in this field. Their biggest downside is because they've been around for so long, it's very hard to innovate. What I mean with innovation, Karl will talk about this in a lot more detail than I can do. What I mean with innovation is use the latest form of technology, AI, mobile, use Android devices, the use of being completely independent from any type of software platform or hosting platform. That's what's coming next. So the next generation are, I said it's local vendors because Karl's on the call today. It can be global ones as well. They are the challengers. They are the Ubers of the WMS environments right now. So they are the disruptors. And they can do a lot in a very short time frame with very low investments. And for a lot of businesses, they're actually sufficient for what they need. Very flexible. Some of the downsides will be, and Karl, apologies up front, is they're smaller businesses. So from a development point of view and from a support point of view, they'll have less resources. That doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. It just means that sometimes you'll have to wait maybe a little bit longer to get things done. On the flip side, you may get things done quicker because they have a lot better understanding of what software can do, and they actually have the actual source code itself, so they can actually do things really fast. Daniel, that's it for me today. I'm actually going to hand over to Karl first. So just in summary, every warehouse needs a WMS, and that's what Karl's going to talk about, and Cory's going to talk about sortation, which comes in many shapes or forms. So thank you for your time. Karl, over to you. Karl, you're on mute.
Thanks. Hello, everybody.
Hello,
everybody. I'm Paul. I'm invited today to talk about warehouse management system, and it's really exciting. And I want to briefly give you an overview of the past, the present, and most importantly, the future of such systems. The evolution of the WMS systems is really, really interesting. It started off with systems that were set up in a way that the warehouse management system prescribes and rules the processes in your warehouse, and you as a client need to adapt to it. There was very little chance of really adapting that system to your requirements. And that's, if you think 15, 20 years back, that was pretty much the case for those WMS systems. The next evolutionary step of those systems was that they created custom-built processes, and that means nothing else, but they allowed your requirements to be coded into their software. It sounds great, but the downside was that those pieces of software become islands. So you would sit on a WMS that's maybe really good for your warehouse 10 years ago, but there's no way of upgrading it. There's very high maintenance costs involved. And if you really want to go in the next step, you would find out that you would either need to have sufficient budget to upgrade your system or actually get a new version of the same vendor. And you can see that a lot of times with the systems that going into upgrades now for large players in the market. And that's especially true around the tier 1 industry, where they simply have a massive framework. That places us into the next evolutionary step. What tier 1 and tier 2 vendors started to do is to make the systems configurable. And all the big players in the market today are doing that. That's really good. You can actually configure and not code your WMS requirements into the product. And that's really great in the beginning. Over time, what happens, and that's software developers in the end, what happens is that you add more and more and more software, you add more and more code to your WMS product. And in the end, it becomes a Moloch, a monster of code that can do a lot, but it will take a long time to learn to even configure it. And that's where you can see a couple of those big systems standing today. They support a lot. They support a lot of different variations that can be configured to adapt to the requirements of clients. But on the downside, you need to have specialists even to configure it. And those are then SAP integration houses and so on and so forth that you can really see. And those those integration managers, so to speak, integration engineers, become a sought after commodity, a sought after resource. The next level, and that's where we are today, is pretty much to look at the WMS differently and to say, what is my core? What do I need to do to be adapted for the future, for the next 10 years? And that's where we started working as well, where we started our product, for example, was to say, okay, we want to have a lean, small core, a lean framework that actually enables artificial intelligence within its core, and that takes care that you can save your data for a very long time. And then around that core, you plug in, so to speak, microservices that then realize your requirements in your warehouse. The advantage of those systems at the moment is that they are very flexible, they're easy to configure, and they don't have this huge amount of dead code, so to speak, that would be delivered to each customer. That drives me to my next transition from WMS into artificial intelligence, because it's really interesting to us. But what is it? I'm Austrian, so I had to put Arnold Schwarzenegger there as the Terminator. In the end, a piece of artificial intelligence. And there are a couple of people who gave us famously some quotes about it. Elon Musk said that artificial intelligence can be the single biggest existential crisis for humankind. Stephen Hawking actually said that artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. I think that human intelligence is still a lot more dangerous than artificial one. If it comes to artificial intelligence, there are a couple of forms of artificial intelligence, and I wanted to make it really easy today and say, okay, we group them into two groups. There's the mind and self-awareness artificial intelligence, and there's reactive and limited memory artificial intelligence. Mind and self-aware is something that all the research companies are working on. Google is working on it, for example. And then reactive and limited memory is something that we want to concentrate on today, because for a warehouse operation, we actually want to have that form of artificial intelligence. We really don't care if our warehouse becomes self-aware. Not much of a benefit there at the moment. Within that group of artificial intelligence, the biggest game changer in our market is machine learning. Machine learning is nothing else but using a lot of data, classifying it, and telling the artificial intelligence to look at the data, and then I give the AI a goal. I don't tell it how to get there, and then the AI needs to find the best possible way to get there. That sounds a bit technical, but in the end, it's quite easy. In our way, in a WMS, we have a lot of data, we collect a lot of data, and that's where the modern WMS systems are completely set up differently. An older WMS system or a lot of systems actually don't keep data well. They keep them for 3 months, maybe a year. More modern systems keep data endlessly. You really rely on this data, and then you start feeding your AI that data to give you predicted outcomes of your future movements, of your future demand in your warehouse. In the end, what you really need is an artificial intelligence core. So again, there are different approaches. A lot of vendors who already have a big software house or a big software package use AI and try to bolt it on to their product. What our advantage is we can use AI within the core. We implemented it as a core piece and then decide when we want to use it. And obviously, data accuracy is key. It's really important to have accurate data and to have the data saved in your system. I have a couple of examples that are really interesting in the warehouse management product at the moment. One is the automatic priority assignment. That's nothing else but giving the data set that could be all my outbound orders of today and giving it to my AI and say, give me the best cubing. And I will give you my factors on what I think a best cubing is. Is it my cartons or my sachets are the fullest possible, or is it the best efficiency of my operators in my warehouse, or is it the fastest time the order can go through my warehouse installation? I can also give all three of them to my AI and say that I weigh them each. And then the AI would go through up to 10,000 different outcomes and actually spit out the most likely outcome to succeed. So that's really, really interesting. And we're using that for a couple of different processes. Another really cool feature would be the best assumption slotting. So everybody knows the pain of slotting your warehouse. And although we usually have forecasts, we all know they are not 100% reliable. What really becomes interesting is because we collect data for a very long time, the longer you run your system, the more accurate your slotting will be, because your AI simply starts learning from your data, starts learning on how to slot your warehouse in the perfect way, in a way that all your pick locations become very efficient. And that brings us into the next piece of smart automation controllers. What I mean by that is that in a zone routing system where you have a conveyor, or in a pick system where you have goods coming to a person, or even with robots, what you really want to do with your software is to control it in a very smart way. You spend money on automation, and you need to make sure that that piece of equipment is used to the best of its capacities. And that's where AI comes into play. It could decide to store your product in various different aisles of a crane block or a shuttle system. And then it really depends on analyzing the shuttles, the movements of the shuttles, and the future movements required in the short term, and assigning the correct or the best route for your system. What we have done already, and what's really, really interesting, is a self-learning voice controller. I've actually done that years ago, and now we've implemented it in our product, and it's really a really good feature. A lot of times when you have voice pick or a voice controller, you need to go through a teach-in process. And our idea was, let's get rid of that teach-in process. Let's get away from being dependent on a specific hardware. We actually can use a Google artificial intelligence and train it to start working on. Here's a summary from Wikipedia. Start working on analyzing the voice of the operator without a teaching process, and in that way becoming really efficient, really flexible, and pushing your voice operation to the next level. All of those examples are implemented in a warehouse product that we have. It's called Do Warehouse. And I promise this is the only slide where I plug my product. We're really proud of this product. It is the next generation warehouse management system, and it implements all the benefits that are there at the moment in technology. It's not only artificial intelligence. You have data warehousing for big data, interfacing multiple sites into one system so that you can actually have a synchronous stock level of all your warehouses, align your processes, and align your reporting. And it's really, really interesting to see how customers now push further, especially in reporting, especially in comparing their warehouses, once you have a system that supports all of that on a baseline. Thank you. That's all from my side. I hope you did enjoy that presentation, and I'll hand over to Cory.
Excellent, Karl. Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Karl, Baz, appreciate the opportunity to be involved in this. I guess I've been watching you guys pretty closely over the last 7 episodes, and yeah, keen to contribute and share some of our experience and knowledge in the industry. So appreciate if you can move on to the next slide. So I thought I'd start out just briefly on who Daifuku are. We're relatively new to the Australasian market itself. We were acquired by Daifuku 6 years ago, but we've done a lot to get some brand awareness out there. We're relatively new to this space or this region. So Daifuku are the global leader in material handling. While a short tenure in Australia, around 80 years in terms of history across the group. And there's 6 divisions in Daifuku, 4 really core divisions in intralogistics, being warehousing and distribution and manufacturing technology, and also in airports, material handling solutions, passenger screening, and also airport information systems. And then automotive manufacturing systems, that's really been the driver for global growth, that and also through local acquisition and just organic expansion. And then clean room systems, which relates really to material handling equipment in dust-free environments, for the semiconductor and flat panel display industry. But I guess locally, I represent the intralogistics group. We also have local expertise in the aviation or airport space. But really our core expertise, in addition to software, is high-speed sortation. And I guess that was our experience prior to acquisition, and something that's a key market focus to us, in addition to what Daifuku as a group bring in terms of warehousing and distribution technology. So next slide, please, Daniel. So I thought, understanding the general theme of what the Fuzzy guys have been doing for this webinar series around embarking on that journey of, upgrading to automation or expanding. I thought rather than getting into nuts and bolts of, the technology itself and the products and solutions that we could specifically offer, I thought better to leverage the experience that, we've gained over a number of years working with many customers, prospective and also existing, and share some of our learnings, some of the watch outs, some of the key items that can be overlooked, I guess to help the range of people who are dialed in for this with a varying level of expertise. Some are, embarking on a move from manual to automation. Some already have a level of automation and in-house expertise. So this is more about sharing from our perspective. So first one in particular is understanding that a manual sortation operation doesn't necessarily translate direct to an automatic one. And I really mean that in terms of a straight change out for process. So automation is good to optimize processes and leverage footprint. We've seen solutions and been involved in projects where we're able to save quite a lot of floor space, in the order of thousands of square meters, just by challenging the operating model, challenging the processes and the assumptions that go into that translation from a manual to an automated operation. And that really feeds into the next part around understanding and developing process flows. And that not only relates to understanding how a case or a product gets from point A to point B, but also understanding the geography as to where those processes sit. And that's one to optimize the solution, but also from a safety and design perspective. So understanding traffic flows, pedestrian modeling, and that interaction between MHE and the automation itself to make sure that the overall solution is not only efficient from an operational perspective, but also safe to operate. And I guess the other key to that is the bit that's harder to quantify, harder to document around exceptions and workarounds, in particular when moving from a manual operation into an automated one. There's a lot of stuff people do by instinct and that isn't necessarily seen when you're looking at moving into an automated environment. And those are really the key risks to be able to make sure that those workarounds, those exceptions are captured as part of the solution design. And the main thing is understand that the processes, the assumptions, the data may be interpreted differently from an automation perspective. So what is relatively simple from a manual perspective could be quite complex from an automation perspective, and vice versa. And the next one is data. I know that Jeff spoke about this, I think, in episode 1 or 2, around the importance of data for the overall solution design, but equally as important for sortation solutions. So understanding, raw data is often better than no data at all. But we also understand that it's often absent, when taking a completely manual operation, as Baz, gave an example on, where somebody, sorts based on a human readable label. Obviously, there's no data capture associated with that. There's nothing in a WMS or a host system to then leverage on to design a solution. So the important thing in the absence of data is ensuring that there's a clear set of assumptions that are agreed, and allowing those assumptions to be challenged, because that's where the overall parameters of a solution will come together in the final design. And that'll really dictate the distribution of volumes, the various mixes, the fluctuations and flows that'll happen across the life of that system, from day 1 through to year 10, or how long the life of the solution is itself. And understanding profiles equally is important. Again, data is critical here, but understanding the mix of product that might go through a sortation solution, and even appreciating that a carton is not as simple as a carton. Stability is a key criteria, also the orientation of a carton that may need to run through a system, and that allow you to decide on where the automation is best placed in terms of a solution, what processes maybe still be best handled as a manual operation. But appreciate that profile can dictate the different technology options that will form an overall solution. Next slide there, please, Daniel. So once you're on that journey of developing a solution, there's really 2 key areas, I guess. And one is an appreciation of the fact that slower is sometimes faster, and there's 2 facets to that, I guess. And one is around understanding flow through a particular system, in particular around critical operating windows, and how we manage or optimize what goes through the equipment itself, and how that's managed from an operational perspective, or even a solution design perspective. So where accumulation is best placed in a solution that optimizes the sorter itself. And then that can feed into understanding the type of equipment that will be used in the application. So there's 3 examples on the images there. I guess the 3 most common types that are seen in warehousing and distribution applications. The top right is a typical line diverter system. The image in the middle is a shoe sorter, and the image on the right is a crossbelt sorter, and they all have different levels of capacity and incremental levels of cost as well. But understanding where you sit within those ranges is quite critical as well. And what I mean by that is you could select a solution that is on the borderline, that is a lower price point, but it does need to run at a higher utilization. It could be less stable and has less headroom in terms of that capacity to handle exceptions or fluctuations. So you may be better selecting a higher level of investment in terms of solution, but run it slower. It'll have more capacity, more headroom, but it'll be a lot more stable through that operation as well. And it's about that importance of flow through an overall system. And the last one is allow yourself to be taken on a journey. There's timeframes that we all work to in terms of understanding that solution development. And we've all seen a sorter largely, but appreciate that technology changes. So what was noisy 10 years ago may not be noisy now. What was inefficient 5 years ago may not be inefficient anymore. And essentially, address it with an open mind, to work through those technology or solution development iterations. And as I said before, allow assumptions and processes to be challenged. Leverage the expertise of an integrator or a vendor, as well as your own experience around the knowledge of your underlying business and process. And I guess consider that the factors that you're likely embarking on a 10 to 15 year commitment, whether it's equipment or even relationship and partnership with a particular vendor or solution provider. Next slide, please, Daniel. So what could go wrong? Well, I guess what we've tried to highlight here is just some key call outs that, items that may be overlooked, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but really some key ones that we see from application to application, customer to customer. And the first one is data integrity, which I'm sure is close to Karl's heart, but the timeliness of data, the quality of it, how we recover from data loss scenarios, and understand that data is critical to a sortation system, and that link with a WMS or a host system as well to be able to achieve what needs to happen through a sorter operation. Barcode label quality, I think, is a subject that comes up on every project I've ever been involved in. And in particular, when you move from a manual operation to an automated environment. So very easy for an operator to pick a carton up, manipulate a hand scanner and get a good read. But when you're running at 2 to 3 meters per second on a sorter, that opportunity is not necessarily available. So understanding that barcode quality is critical and something that's managed on an ongoing basis as well, whether it's third parties that provide product, whether it's items in transit that can have damage labels, whether it's placement on cartons that can obscure for an automated sortation system. It's quite critical to make sure that that's right from the beginning and it's managed on an ongoing basis. The third is around ongoing operating principles. So sort plans are critical to the ongoing operation and critical to getting the most out of the equipment. They're really a set and forget in terms of one sort plan is all I need to operate with. And they're often, changed based on season, but in many instances should be changed on a daily or even multiple times in a day to get the most out of the equipment, the most out of the operation, and make sure that you're optimizing the flows through the system, to minimize the amount of inefficiency. Manning levels are also critical to that operating principle, and I guess this is more an observation around in-feed versus out-feed, and I've seen several times around a bias towards managing an in-feed operation because it's easy to measure, it's easy to see. I have a container arrive or a truck or a pallet, and the concept is as quickly as I can feed it in, the quicker I can get rid of it and I can sort it. But often the constraint or the bottleneck is what happens at the end of shoot or end of line after the sort happens. And it's a process where a piece of equipment needs to manage, varying profile or a secondary process, or it could be a person at the end of the shoot that needs to make a decision. Where does it go on a pallet? Where does it go in this truck? And the process of actually handling that outfeed operation is less efficient than an infeed, where people are just loading cartons onto a conveyor. So getting an appreciation for that and ensuring that there's a balance, and it's not uncommon to see a 3-to-1 ratio in some instances where there's 3 times as many people at end of shoot as there are on an infeed to get that right balance in terms of material flow. And the last one around operations article presentation. It's critical to be able to get the most out of a material handling solution in terms of making sure that the product is oriented correctly, it's the right way up, it has the best chance of being read, it's less susceptible to being jammed, and it's something that needs to be managed on an ongoing basis. And the general principle is that good in equals good out, bad in equals bad out, and it's something that needs a level of supervision and management, and in particular when you have transient or temporary labour forces that are managing parts of those operations. And the last point is around redundancy, and there's usually quite a critical decision point around what level of redundancy you incorporate into a solution, and it can drive cost and complexity, but generally not all technology is the same. So some equipment has levels of redundancy that are built into it, whether it's drive configurations or the way it stores and manages power or the way that power and comms or connectivity is run around the system. And you may not need other levels of redundancy, and you can reduce some of that complexity and costs through that way. And then understanding failures and workarounds. So it's inevitable that something goes wrong, and how does the automation and the wider operation manage that? In most instances, you could have an option to fully automate a failure mode, but that again is going to add cost and complexity. Some workarounds on a manual basis are completely acceptable depending on the risk profile, the frequency, and what happens as an impact to your business. But I guess overall across these 4 points, it really comes back to making sure that there's an understanding on that journey of developing a solution to make sure that, you know, the experience and knowledge of the business, you know, is communicated and understood, and also you leverage the most out of the automation itself, you know, through that journey with, you know, vendor, customer, and consultant, I guess, you know, in many cases as well. So I think that's the last one. Daniel? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cory and Karl and Baz. I sit here kind of listening to everyone sharing their knowledge, and just do feel quite privileged that we get to share this knowledge with the industry, and also learn a thing or two ourselves. I think we're coming close to our time, and we'll see as everyone sticks around for a little bit, we'll just jump straight into some Q&A. I had a bit of a question, kind of going back to the warehouse, back to the journey, which seems to be quite a common theme across everyone's discussions today as well. But we come to the dispatch end of our warehouse, and as a warehouse manager, we're trying to determine how much sortation should happen within your DC. Now, I guess everyone's got would have a slight different take on it. Baz, functionally, what would you say are the key kind of inputs that you'd look for to determine whether or not you sort just by state within your warehouse, as opposed to possibly going to a more granular sort? Cory, interested to see, you know, does it depend on how much space you have, how much budget you have, how much capacity you require, how much actual throughput? And Karl, how does you know, an AI-driven WMS system allow you to make that decision best? So maybe we'll start with Baz, go to Cory, and finish off with Karl.
Sure. Look, I think it's usually in the end it just comes down to cost in most cases, and cost can be, you know, it can be space, it can be what your carrier charges you based on the volume you ship, it can be what your operators are going to cost you based on what the equipment is going to cost you. But in the end, everything is driven by cost. And I'm sure Cory and Karl will have a different opinion about this one, but most people will look at their budget and say, well, this is what's going to cost me today, this is what I need to achieve in future. What can I afford? It's short. Cory, you want to jump in on this one?
Yep. Okay. Well, I guess it's a pretty open-ended question, but I guess it comes down to what the overall network strategy is in terms of what's most appropriate for, you know, how granular or not you would go in a, you know, in a sortation design, and leverage the benefits of, you know, less touches downstream, I guess, is, you know, a typical driver. But it's probably, you know, equally important to look at what the automation can do for you, not necessarily in terms of the number of regional or location splits, but also what you can do from a profile perspective, or how you might manage downstream data that benefits you. So it may not necessarily be a granular level of split that you do purely for, you know, a large delivery. It might be secondary processing, whether it's through further automation, but or it could be a combination of all of them. But as you say, Baz, it's a cost is usually a driver, also complexity, but also what needs to happen on a wider network, I guess, is what we typically see as well.
I would have expected you as a kind of equipment supplier to maybe focus on the size of things a little bit more as well. Size obviously kind of puts you into different technology and automation buckets. Is that right? Yeah,
I guess that's sort of the result at the end of it. But, you know, we're keen to understand, you know, how that overall, you know, business operates, how the network operates, how you get the most out of the equipment, because there are different levels of that, different scales of investment. But typically, you know, when people embark on that journey, they don't necessarily understand what the automation can give them. So, you know, it's an ideal scenario to be blank sheet of paper and understand, you know, what the potential options are.
Okay. Karl, did you want to add anything on how maybe the AI side can help you choose the right solution as well?
Yeah, that's absolutely. So especially when it comes to dispatch behavior, AI can really help in seeing correlations between data of orders, dispatch waves, dispatch times, truckloads, that you would not expect or that you would not see yourself. So it's really interesting to add an AI in your dispatch organization, in your dispatch management, especially when it comes to when do I sort what to which door. And if there's a buffer available, do I want to use the buffer? Do I want to have a buffer that's mixed with a item buffer for picking? So for goods to person, can I actually utilize additional capacity as a buffer for dispatch and therefore clean up my dispatch and do just-in-time delivery to my doors? So there's a lot of potential where you actually, with the same costs that you already have, if you implement AI, you will reduce those costs for sure, simply by improving your process.
Yeah, I guess Cory mentioned the whole sort plans not being something that you set and forget, and maybe with a future with an AI-driven system, an AI platform, you can actually grab that data and make better decisions around, you know, how much you do buffer. Because I think, Cory, is that what you were kind of alluding to in terms of what else the automation can bring to the table, in terms of possibly smoothing out some what used to be peaks? If you have more capacity, you can smooth that out, accumulate it upstream or downstream, and move it when you actually need to. Is that?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And when you are kind of trying to orchestrate, because you know the term that we're using, this term is orchestrating your dispatch operation. We've talked about volume. Most of the time it's mainly about volume in terms of tracking and having those plans. Are there any other levers that you're trying to pull from an operation in terms of what am I trying to achieve? How do I achieve it in the most optimal manner? Is it just volume that you're trying to smooth out?
No, it's volume and any supporting operating process, really. You know, leveraging the equipment itself, you know, to manage what happens around the equipment, whether it's a storage medium, whether it's a picking operation, you know, or a staging operation downstream of the sorter itself.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We just had a question come through, which I'll read off as well. It's saying how would sortation technologies, these technologies, possibly WMS as well, may have a bit to say there as well, Karl. How would these technologies affect distribution centres where they are also providing a value-added service? So I guess this is talking about the fact we've been working through the warehouse functionally. What happens if there's a value-added service in the way? Karl, can your WMS help manage the value-added servicing from a sortation point of view? Is that something I think you'd want to do that after? You'd want to sort after you've finished your process? I'm not sure if you want to add anything else on that, Cory.
Yeah, I think from a value-added service, it really depends which service and how complex they are. But you can always improve on it. You can always minimize your footprint actually of value-added service stations that you need to provide if you utilize them smart. It's the same thing as with any equipment utilization. You really want to utilize it at the perfect rate, the high rate. Therefore, actually use less equipment for the same outcome. And that's really good what you said before is, do I really need this peak in my operation, or can I work around it and therefore save quite a lot of money, quite a lot of cost? And that's the same thing with value-added services.
Yeah, it really goes back to working smarter, not harder. I think on that note, thank you all for your time today, and to all the attendees for joining us for another week, and for the questions coming through as well. We'll leave you on that note for today. Thank you very much.